worked the night shift at this 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just me, a register, and endless nights of selling cigarettes and energy drinks to truck drivers and insomniacs. I've been there for almost 3 years, and honestly, nothing ever happens. It's boring, predictable, dead, which is probably why what happened that night caught me so completely off guard. It was around 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. Dead quiet. I was restocking the coolers when a car pulled up to pump 3. I barely looked at it. But then the guy came inside and something felt wrong immediately. I can't even explain it. He was perfectly normal looking. Regular clothes, normal height, nothing that should have set off alarm bells. But the way he moved was different. He moved like he didn't have complete control over his own body. Like his limbs were slightly out of sync with what his brain was telling them to do. It was subtle, but it was there. This underlying wrongness that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He wandered the aisles for maybe 5 minutes without picking anything up, just walking, staring at the products but not really seeing them. I was the only one there, and I started to feel genuinely uneasy. My instinct was telling me something was off about this guy. Then he stopped in front of the bathroom door and just stood there, not moving, for almost a full minute, completely still. I remember watching him from behind the counter, wondering what the hell he was doing. It got to the point where I was about to ask if he needed something when he suddenly turned and walked to the counter. He bought a single pack of gum, paid with exact change, didn't say a word, didn't make eye contact, just left. I watched him walk back to his car, and I remember thinking how weird he looked standing at the pump. He wasn't actually pumping gas, he was just standing there with his hand on the pump handle, completely motionless, like he was frozen. At one point he turned and looked directly at the gas station window, directly at me. His face was completely blank, no expression, nothing, just empty eyes staring through the glass. It was the kind of stare that doesn't feel human, the kind that makes your skin crawl. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt so much longer. Then he got back in his car and drove away, disappearing down the dark highway. I stood there for a few minutes, just processing what I'd just seen. I told myself I was being paranoid. The guy was just weird. That's all. Maybe he was on something. Maybe he was dealing with some kind of disability or condition I didn't understand. But my gut was screaming that something was seriously off about the entire encounter. There was something predatory about the way he'd looked at me. Something intentional. Everything might have stayed normal if I hadn't decided to go outside to check the bathrooms around 3 a.m. standard routine. We check them every couple hours to make sure they're clean and that nobody's shooting up in there or causing trouble. I grabbed my keys and headed to the back of the building. The bathroom door was unlocked, which was normal. We keep them unlocked during the day, but lock them at night if the place gets dead. Tonight they were supposed to be locked. I opened it anyway, and my entire body went cold. There was something written on the mirror in what looked like condensation, but it was too thick, too deliberate, and it was still wet. 3 words written in huge letters with something that looked like a finger. I see you. My heart started pounding. I immediately checked the lock on the bathroom door. It had a deadbolt. It was locked from the inside. That bathroom hadn't been accessed from anywhere else. There's only one way in and one way out. I stood there trying to process what I was seeing. Who writes that? On a mirror? How? The message was still wet, which meant it had been written recently. Within the last few minutes, probably. I called the manager immediately. It was 3 in the morning, but I didn't care. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding annoyed. I told him what I'd found. He told me to lock up the back area and not to worry about it, that it was probably just some kids messing around. He said he'd check the security footage in the morning and that I should just focus on finishing my shift. He wasn't taking this seriously at all, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized something that made my skin crawl. That guy, the one who'd bought gum. He'd gone to the bathroom door. He'd stood there for a full minute. What if he'd gone in? What if he'd somehow gotten past the lock? But that didn't make sense. The door was definitely locked. Unless he'd locked it from the outside somehow, unless he'd written that message and then managed to lock it without me hearing anything. unless he was still in there. I didn't check. I wasn't going back in that bathroom. I just locked the bathroom area off with an out of order sign and moved back to the front counter. I tried to finish my shift normally, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every car that pulled up, I half expected it to be him. Every shadow in the parking lot looked suspicious. My nerves were completely shot. I kept checking the security camera monitors, but they just showed an empty store and an empty parking lot. Nothing else, nothing threatening, just me and the fluorescent lights. At 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my shift ended, he came back. Same car, same blank expression. He parked right in front of the store and just sat in his vehicle, staring at the entrance. Staring at me. We made eye contact for what felt like an eternity. It was intense, like he was looking directly into me, trying to see something inside. My hand immediately went to my phone. I was about to call the police when he did something that made me freeze completely. He slowly raised his hand and pressed a single finger against his lips, like he was telling me to be quiet, to not say anything, to not call anyone. It was deliberate. It was a message. The gesture held a threat that was somehow worse than if he'd made an actual threat. I don't know why, but I didn't call the police immediately. I just stood frozen. He held that gesture for about 10 seconds, his empty eyes never leaving mine. Then he put the car in reverse and left. I watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. I didn't go home that morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour trying to figure out what the hell was happening. By the time I called the manager and told him I'd quit, I'd already made my decision. I was done. This job wasn't worth whatever was happening. I quit that job 2 days later, after not showing up and finally calling in. I couldn't face that place again. I've never seen him since. The security footage supposedly had a malfunction that entire hour. The manager said it was just a technical glitch, but I could tell he didn't believe it either. And I have no idea why that guy came back just to stare at me and tell me to stay silent. What was he warning me about? What did he want me to know? What was he trying to communicate? I've tried not to think about it, but I can't. I still see his empty eyes sometimes, especially when I'm alone, especially late at night. And sometimes I wonder if he's still watching me, even though I left that job. Sometimes I wonder if he was ever really gone at all. Okay, if you thought that was crazy, I promise you this one's worse. A few months after the first incident, I was still working at the same gas station, even though I'd quit after that experience. Yeah, I know, stupid decision. But I needed the money and I told myself I was being paranoid. The guy was probably just some random weirdo passing through town. Lightning doesn't strike twice, right? Wrong. I'd been back at work for maybe 6 weeks when things started getting strange again, but this time it was different. This time there was a pattern. Every night at exactly 3:47 a.m., the door chime would go off. Not like a customer was coming in, just a single chime. Once, that's it. Then nothing. No one would be there. I'd rush to the window, check the parking lot, scan the road. Nothing. Empty. But that chime kept happening, night after night. 3:47 a.m. every single time. At first, I thought the chime was malfunctioning. I checked it a dozen times. It worked fine when actual customers came in, but during those late night hours, it would only go off at that exact time. I told my manager about it. He said it was probably a sensor issue and that he'd get it fixed. He never did. By the second week, I was convinced I was losing my mind. But then the notes started appearing. The first one was taped to the bathroom mirror. Just a small piece of paper with 2 words written in messy handwriting. Remember me? I ripped it down immediately and threw it away. Probably just someone messing with me, I thought. But then the next night there was another one, this time on the register. Why did you call them? I hadn't told anyone about the police incident except my manager. Not even my family knew the full story. So how did he know I'd called the cops? That's when I knew for certain. It was him, the guy with the empty eyes. He was back, and he was in the store. I started to panic. I called my manager that night and told him everything. I told him about the guy from months ago, the message on the bathroom mirror, all of it. I expected him to think I was crazy. Instead, he went completely quiet. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said the security footage from that night, the one that supposedly malfunctioned, hadn't malfunctioned at all. He said he'd watched it. He said the entire hour of footage was there. But here's the thing that terrified me. In that footage, he saw me having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. I was standing in the back room, moving my head like I was talking to another person, but there was no one there. Just empty space. And it went on for the entire missing hour. I didn't believe him at first. I asked him to show me the footage. He refused. He said it would only scare me more. He told me to take some time off. He told me to see a therapist. He said that maybe I was experiencing something, but it wasn't what I thought it was. I went home that night, absolutely convinced I was having a mental breakdown, but the notes kept coming. Even at home, I'd come back to my apartment and there would be a folded piece of paper on my doorstep. Always the same question, asked differently. Don't you remember? Why won't you remember? You have to remember. Remember what? I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd never seen this guy before that first night at the gas station. Or had I? That's when the memories started getting fuzzy. I'd try to recall specific details about my past, and it would be like looking through fog. I remember working at the gas station. I remember my apartment. But anything before that felt distant, vague, like trying to remember a dream. When I tried to push harder, I'd get this sharp pain in my temples that made me want to scream. I finally decided to go back to work. I told myself that facing this would be better than hiding from it. My manager seemed relieved when I showed up. He pulled me aside and told me something else. He said 3 other employees had quit in the past few months. Each one had mentioned seeing a man who matched the description I'd given. Each one had reported the same chime going off at 3:47 a.m., and each one had found notes. Some of them had even found notes in their homes, so I wasn't alone. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It made it worse because it meant this thing, whatever it was, wasn't obsessed with me specifically. It was connected to the gas station itself, or maybe it was connected to all of us. The notes I'd collected were sitting in a box under my bed. I'd saved every single one. That night, I got them out and spread them across my kitchen table. There had to be something I was missing. Some pattern, some message hidden in all of this. That's when I noticed something I'd completely overlooked. The notes were getting more personal. The earlier ones were generic, but the recent ones mentioned specific details about my life. My apartment number, the name of my dog, the fact that I'd been to a specific coffee shop on 5th Street. How could he know all this? Unless he'd been following me, unless he knew exactly where I lived, unless he was watching me right now. I checked all my locks. I opened every closet, looked under my bed, checked behind the shower curtain. Nothing. But that feeling of being watched didn't go away. It got worse. I started sleeping with the lights on. I stopped going to that coffee shop. I barely left my apartment. I was losing it. I knew I was losing it, but I couldn't stop. Then, one night at 3:47 a.m., my apartment door chime went off. I have a doorbell camera. I don't know why I didn't use it earlier. But that night, in a moment of desperate clarity, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the footage. I watched the live feed. Nothing. Just my hallway, empty. But the chime kept going off. Over and over. Every 30 seconds. A sound I'd grown to recognize and dread. The same chime from the gas station. I made a decision that night. I called the police. I told them everything. I told them about the man, the notes, the feeling of being watched, all of it. They came to my apartment. They checked everything. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry. No evidence of anyone being in my space. The officer suggested the same thing my manager had, that I might need to talk to someone professionally. But before he left, he asked me one question. He asked if I remembered anything unusual from before I started working at the gas station. He asked if I'd ever been in any kind of accident. He asked why I'd moved to this town. and I realized I couldn't answer any of those questions. The memories just weren't there. I haven't been back to the gas station since that night. I don't answer the door. I barely answer my phone. The notes stopped coming, which is somehow worse than when they were arriving, because the silence feels like waiting, like he's done with me for now, but he might come back. And when he does, maybe I'll finally remember what it is he wants me to remember. Maybe I'll finally understand why he keeps saying I should remember him, because deep down, in a part of my mind I'm afraid to explore, I think I do remember him. I think I've always known him, and I think whatever happened before I came to this town, whatever I've been trying to forget, is the reason he's still here.